Hi, I'm Karl Taylor from visualeducation.com. In today's video, we're going to look at usage fees and how that applies to commercial photography and filmmaking. So, usage fees. A lot of people get confused about this. They either don't understand what they are or what they're for, or more importantly, whether to charge them or not, and then how much to charge. And it is quite a complicated minefield and very much a grey area in commercial photography. But what I want to do in this video is run through it. Then I'm going to show you how you can use a usage calculator to figure out the sort of usage fees that a client might be expected to pay. But it is very dependent on the type of campaign, the type of work, the level that it's at. And also there's quite a lot of fluctuation and negotiation that goes into these things as well. But I'm going to talk about it from my decades of experience and hopefully give you some answers. So first of all, we need to understand when and what usage fees are for, when they're applied. So if you're shooting for a small local company in your area, let's say they manufacture windows and they only sell in your town or nearby area, then that's not what we call campaign level advertising photography or video production. You're just working on at a local level for a sort of local client. And a client like that is not going to understand or appreciate why you would charge usage fees, and most likely they won't accept it either. Usage fees are something that is usually designated to higher level advertising campaign work that reaches a large audience. National level advertising, photography or filmmaking, or international level filmmaking. Now this concept might be a little bit hard to understand, but let's go in it one step at a time. If you were working for your local business, which we hypothesized as, say, a local window company or window or doors manufacturer, they would expect to employ you as a photographer or videographer to do a shoot for them, to show their services, maybe images of their staff, show their production, images for their website, and maybe for some brochures that they produce. And it's very likely that they would be paying you for your day rate and then for your post-production time, and then you give the images to them, you get paid, and that's the normal procedure. And that's the normal procedure for working with any sort of local level business. And that type of business at a local level would not understand what a usage fee was for or why you would be trying to apply it. And my advice on that is don't even bother, because you're not going to really be able to make it clear to them the purpose of it. It's not really applicable in the same way, as we'll discover a little bit later on. And effectively, you don't want to cause detriment to your approach to winning the job based on your day rate and winning that work in the first place. So for that type of level, if you can understand what I mean by that type of local level business, smaller businesses that don't run national advertising campaigns, for that type of business, just forget about usage fees altogether. So the next level up is a bigger company, a company that might be manufacturing doors and windows, but at a national level, and they've got lots of branches and lots of manufacturing bases across the country, and they advertise online, in brochures, but also, importantly, at a national level, the images get exposure on, say, some billboard posters, in some magazines, in national newspapers, etc., etc. Or the images are part of a dedicated campaign to promote this brand for a specific period of time across specific regions. So it's a much bigger company, huge turnover, large volume of staff, that sort of thing. And the images, most importantly, are going to get a lot more exposure. Now, it could be a next level up. Let's say you were working for a big cosmetics brand. They might have a headquarters in Los Angeles or London, New York, or Paris, and the images that you're going to produce for them may only be for one specific country for whatever reasons, because it's targeting a specific type of audience and consumer, or the images might be for a global campaign where the images are going to be on billboards in Piccadilly Circus in London, Times Square in New York, multiple magazines around the world, advertising all over the place, print, digital media, etc. So that's a huge global campaign. And with that comes a huge amount of responsibility. And sometimes I like to kind of think of usage fees as almost like a responsibility fee as well. It's a fee that's additional to the photography services based on the exposure that the project is going to receive and how valuable, if you like, the project is to that multinational or national sized company, and your level of responsibility towards them as well. So some of you might still be asking, well, what does usage fees actually mean? So we understand now that it's not at local level, it's more at national, larger campaigns, or certainly international campaigns. But what do we actually mean by usage fees? Well, as a producer, photographer, or videographer, you're creating work for a client that's based usually on a brief, research, you've been given mood boards, you've had several meetings, you've discussed what the image is going to look like, the whole campaign has been planned, and you execute those images for a given price. That price you've already quoted, and the price includes your pre-production, your planning time, testing, pre-light, then the actual shoot, then the post-production time, etc., etc. And that may run into many thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars just to accomplish the shoot with all the studio time, assistants, equipment, lighting, however many days, etc. But that's just for your service, if you like. A usage fee is entirely separate. A usage fee is essentially licensing the images for a particular level of exposure. And when we talk about level of exposure, we're talking about the amount of material that those images will appear on. So it might be print, digital, out-of-house media, it might be billboards, it might be magazines, it could be whatever. But obviously they already know in advance what they're going to use the content for. Then it's the period of time that they expect to use the images for. So is it going to be for 1 year or 2 years, etc. And the quantity sometimes of the amount of printed material. So if there's going to be, 500,000 print run of something, etc., that's obviously an increase in the amount of usage that is being applied to that project. So usage is essentially how much use these images are going to get. And this is where I take you back to what I mean by a sort of responsibility factor as the photographer. When you start working on these big campaign images for national or international level, your responsibility is sort of far greater than just your 2-3 days of shooting and day rate, because now everything that you're doing is getting a level of exposure well beyond the norm, And equally, the client is also paying for that advertising space. And this is really an interesting factor in it as well. When you have a shoot that you think, wow, that's tremendously expensive, let's say it's $10,000 or 20 or 30, whatever $1,000, you might think, if you sort of sit outside this world, you might think, wow, that's a lot of money. But if you consider that the client might be putting these images on billboards, magazines, print runs, the actual expense of the advertising space is far, far greater than the costs of the shoot. And this is a really interesting point because, again, it goes back to that level of responsibility. The photographer, your level of responsibility has been scaled up now because the exposure that this is going to reach. And clients at that level with that sort of budget and that sort of campaign spend, it's in a whole nother league. And the usage fee there is kind of to compensate the photographer or videographer for that level of responsibility, that level of exposure with their work, and to give some sort of payment, if you like, or recompense to the input that the photographer has made creatively towards the success of that campaign. So that gives you an explanation of the differences between local, national, international, and where and why you could expect to be able to charge usage fees. So the next question that I get asked the most is, well, how much should the usage fees be? How do I work out the usage fees? And this is a little bit difficult. We're going to look at the Association of Photographers, which is the body in the UK that protects professional photographers who become members of the AOP, and then they have advantages with legal advice, etc. And the usage calculator is also one of the functioning tools on their website. And we're going to look at how you would use that tool to calculate your usage fees. But even with using the tool to calculate usage fees, there is still some level of fluctuation in some pricing. For example, usage fees can actually be far greater than the fees you charged for the shoot. Often they are far greater. And therefore, it sometimes becomes a negotiation with you and the client or you and the advertising agency as to what the usage fees will be, because the client might say, well, I've only got the budget for this. I don't have that budget to cover this. And you've got to start to weigh up, well, you know, they don't seem willing to push on the usage fees in where they should be, or the budget for the shoot's gone bigger than they expected, etc., etc. So as all things in business, there is a negotiation on some of these things. But the reasons that the Association of Photographers have a usage calculator is because it's kind of like the sort of benchmark guidelines, if you like, as to what the usage fee charges should be. Right, let's take a look at that now. I think I've explained clearly enough for you the concept of usage fees. Let's take a look, first of all. So this is my commercial website at karltaylor.com, which is obviously separate to visualeducation.com. Some of these images on here are from my commercial portfolio. Some of them are from our training website. Some are big campaign and client work. I'm not going to tell you which images have had usage fees applied, because it's not my place to divulge client information in that way. But it's fair to say that over the years, there's a lot of product shoots that I've worked on that definitely require usage fees for national or international level work. So we're going to jump over to the Association of Photographers website. Their website is the-aop.org. It's a great organization. I believe the current chairman is Tim Flack, who's a friend of mine. I've worked with Tim before. The organisation's purpose is to be a body to represent professional photographers in the UK and somewhat throughout Europe, offer advice, legal advice, various other factors. They have awards, you have a photographer's database and listing, etc. And I believe in the USA, they have a similar organisation as well. If we look at the website and we go to the information tab here, there is a section for the usage calculator. There is an overview of the calculator here. And they say here, if you're unsure as to how to use the base usage rate, then read this document. We'll look at that in a second, but let me just explain. The base usage rate, or the BUR, as it's called in the industry, is the sort of key figure that you need to plug into the usage calculator before it can calculate anything. And this is where there is some discrepancies between photographers, clients, etc., as to what the base usage rate amount should be. But if we go over to this document here, and it talks about the initial license and negotiated fee, etc., exclusivity, calculating usage, setting the base usage fee. To prevent misunderstanding when negotiating usage fees and to enable, it's good to set a base usage rate. And the base usage rate is a starting point for negotiating use of work over and above any media, time period, etc., etc. And they suggest that the base usage rate should never be less than the negotiated daily shoot fee or day rate. And it should be pitched according to the expertise of the photographer and the amount of input from the photographer. Now, this is interesting because that creates a huge disparity in what the usage fees would be from one photographer from another. And the reason I say that is because some photographers' day rates are wildly different to other photographers' day rates. I've got, I'd say, a mid to high sort of day rate for my professional level of experience and the type of clients I work for. I know other photographers that operate on a much lower day rate, and I know other photographers that are on a much higher day rate. Now, if you put their day rate into the usage calculator as the BUR, the base usage rate, then of course they're going to end up with wildly different usage fees, even if it was for the same client and the same project. So I guess that's to be expected from the client's point of view. Well, if you're using a more expensive photographer, then the usage may well be more as well. But this is where we get into a grey area where a certain client might say, well, I'll accept your day rate, but I'm not accepting those usage fees because they're far beyond what I would have paid with the last guy, etc., etc. So this is why in business and in this sort of thing, everything is kind of, up in the air and negotiable. So let's jump back to the calculator. And I also have various methodologies on the usage fees. So considering that they recommend you put in your day rate as the base usage fee, then you have to consider that some other photographer might be 50% of your day rate, or another photographer might be 30% more than your day rate. So I'm not going to give you exact examples. We're just going to put in some numbers. I mean, I don't mind telling you that my day rate varies between £3,000 and £4,000, which is about $3,500 to $4,500, and that's just for the shooting day. That includes the use of my studio space, it includes the use of my equipment, and it includes my expertise and knowledge to shoot for you for a day. But on top of that, there may be fees for assistance. There will be pre-production fees for any testing that are done prior to that. Pre-production rates that I usually charge are half of my day rate. And then there's post-production rates that I charge for the Photoshop post-production work that happens after the shoot, and that's usually charged at about half my day rate as well. So you've got usually pre-production fees, day rate fees, post-production. So if, for example, I was saying that an average shoot day rate was £3,000, then the AOP is saying that's what you should put in as your base usage rate. But that could actually make some of these usage fees quite expensive. So sometimes I adjust that base usage rate, but let's just put it in as an example. Before we do that, you can see there's the view results, there's the set period, set the media, and set the territory, because those are the three defining factors. One, how long is the images going to be out there and on display? Two, what type of media are the images going to be used for? Print, billboards, blah, blah, blah. And then where are the images going to be used? So let's do an example. So I'm going to put in 3,000 as the BUR. I'm going to set a 1-year period as the usage period. And then I'm going to go into print media. And you have all of these various options that you can choose from. So you might have some that's just going to be used in press or posters, international media, direct mail, and they've all got various different percentages applied to them. But let's say, for example, they wanted to go with all print media so that they're covered for any type of printing media. So it includes every type of printing media. So I'm going to tick all print media. And then let's say they want all digital usage as well, because there are options for just social media, PR, internet advertising, digital posters, etc. Now, it's worth pointing out here that if a client says, oh, I want for our website, I want for internet advertising, we want some for PR, and we want some for social media, when you tick all those boxes, the actual totals will be more than all digital media. So you have to be careful with how you use this and make sure that the client is actually getting good value, because sometimes the all print media or all digital media is actually less expensive than selecting several individual points. And then again, we've got here, now we've selected all print media and all digital media. Well, that's actually all media. So we may be in a situation now where the client's actually going to be paying too much. So we can deselect those two and just say, well, all media. And the client is now covered for all print work and all digital display as well. So let's just go with that for ease. We'll go back to it in a second to show you the difference. Then we've got the territories, which would be worldwide, European Union, USA only, etc., North America only, blah, blah, blah. And then beyond that, there's country groupings like smaller regional areas that can be set, countries in band A that get a specific percentage applied to them, countries in band B, which are slightly less because the populations are less, and then so on, countries in band C, even less again, and then countries in band D, where it's considered that the usage and reach isn't going to be as significant. So we'll just go with the country groupings. No, actually, let's not do that. Let's go to countries in band A. I'm going to put in Australia, Canada, and United Kingdom for this particular campaign. So let's pretend it's not in the USA. It's just going to be in UK, Australia, and Canada. And now we go back and you can see that the usage fee is £27,000 for that level of usage, which may sound like a huge amount of money, but given that the client is going to be using it potentially on all types of print media, brochures, magazine adverts, press adverts, billboards, digital billboards, television even, etc., because we've set all media, then the price has rocketed up. And that was just for a 1-year period. Now let's turn all media off on that, and let's change it to they're just going to use it on their company website, and they're going to use it on brochures and point of sale. The price has now dropped to 20,250. So you can see how the different types of usage has a huge effect on the pricing. And you can read more about what each of those individual items are and what they mean. You can look that up further. We don't have time to go through all of that right now. But for example, if we're at 20,250, and if I go to digital media and we say that they want to add the use of the images to television as well, then it jumps right up to 29,000. And that's actually more than it was when we had all media selected. So this is where you've got to be careful, because the usage now is not in keeping with the discount the client would have got for using all media, and they're not having any limitations on it or any worries about it. You just know that they've got ability to use it on all media. So let's just jump back to all print media, turn these other ones off, don't accidentally leave those on, and we'll go to all digital media, turn those off. Oh, sorry, no, it's not that one. All media instead. Turn all print media off because we don't need that. We can shrink those down because we've now got all media selected. And that takes us back to our £27,000. Now, if you feel that your base usage rate though is too high because your own day rate is much higher than some other photographers, then feel free to adjust this, because of course if I adjust that to £2,000 as my base usage rate, you can see that changes the total usage fee figure down to £18,000. Now, how, let's think of a common scenario here. If you were doing a campaign level shoot for a client that had pre-production, then your day rates, and then post-production, where might we be with that sort of pricing? Well, let's say, for example, you needed to do 1 day of testing for this big campaign. Let's say, we're talking about decent sized campaign work here. So let's just use some examples here. So let's say your pre-production work is half your day rate. So let's put in 1,500 for the pre-production work. Then you've got, say, 3 days of shooting on this project. So let's say 3 times 3,000 is 9,000. And then let's say you've got 2 days of post-production. So 1,500 per day gives you another 3,000 on there. So that's a total of 1 day pre-production, 3 days shooting, and 2 days post-production. So you've actually got 6 working days there, and that's giving a total of 13,500. Now that might just be a sort of, give you an example as a possible average size project. So 13,500 in billable time and creative time and fees and equipment and studio. Some photographers that may be more, and some photographers that may be less. But of course, if I had those fees of 13,500 and then I'm using my BUR of 3,000, then the actual usage fees of 27,000 are way, way higher than my shoot fees. They're actually more than double. And that's common. And you shouldn't be afraid of this, because if you are shooting at that level on campaign work that is that big, that's going to get that level of exposure, then of course it's expected that these usage fees are appropriate. Equally, keep in mind that the cost that the client will be paying for the advertising space itself may run into millions, if not just hundreds of thousands. It's going to run into huge amounts of money that will dwarf these costs for sure. But let's just change it up a little bit and see what would happen if they only wanted to run something in print. So they were going to produce brochures that were going to be dispatched, and it was going to go on packaging. Now the usage fee at the same BUR has dropped to 9,900 because there's just those very specific purposes that they want to use the images for. And this is often how it works. The client is going to tell you in advance what the purpose of the campaign, what the purpose of the images are, and that's how you then apply that to the usage calculator. The grey area really arrives in terms of what are you going to set the base usage rate at. Now the AOP, as you saw there, recommend that you set it at your day rate. I would say that's a reasonable guide, but equally, you don't want to lose the work. So you have to also think about what level is appropriate. You may have a client that you work with regularly that brings you a lot of work, and usage fees are applied for nearly all projects because it's national level or international level work. And you might decide, you know what, for this client, I'm going to apply a base usage rate of half of my day rate. And there you see that drops it down to 13,500, which is actually about the same cost as the shoot fees example I gave. So this base usage rate thing is the difficult one, if you like. It's the one where there is no set in stone. There are guidelines, but ultimately in business, everything is a negotiation. And what you put in there and what you get out is entirely up to you. And I think you need to evaluate it based on the type of client and the type of work, the level of the campaign. Just through experience, you kind of learn and understand, you know, the sort of capacity of the campaign, the importance of the campaign, the level of the shoot, if you like. And you have to kind of work these things out with experience. So hopefully what I've shown you today gives you some ideas, some guidelines, some examples, gives you examples on how to use the usage calculator and to understand where and when usage fees are applicable and appropriate. Keep in mind, as I said, this really is for the sort of mid to top level end of the market. If you're a photographer operating local or city level businesses and you've got a busy little photography studio running and you're doing work for various commercial clients or manufacturers, but they're not familiar with usage fees, you're probably just going to lose yourself work if you start throwing usage fees at smaller level stuff. But if that client you're working for operates at a national level, international level, and they're going to make huge use of the images with huge exposure, then it's quite likely that they will expect and understand what usage fees are. And of course, if you're working for an advertising agency and they're working for the bigger client, they're equally going to understand what usage fees are. My experience in recent years is that this is really more for the top level end of the market. So keep that in mind when pitching your jobs and considering the usage fee. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope it was informative. I'm Karl Taylor from visualeducation.com. Thanks for watching.